Welcome, everyone, to the February 2025 edition of the Monthly Market Update by Kingdom Focused Financial. Today, we're hosted by Michael Smith and Chuck Etzweiler. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Derek. As always, it's good to see you and good to have you here joining us. Chuck, good to have you joining us again this month.
Be with you, sir.
Happy February.
Absolutely.
Right? We're chugging along. We're moving well into the new year now. And for those of you who have not yet seen our January market update, take a minute, go subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch that. In it, we laid out our expectations for this year and kind of gave an overview of what we were thinking might happen this year. And we typically identify our strategies each year through an acronym and a theme. And this year, that theme is the word power. And so today, we're hoping to dive into some details around that letter P to help you understand, what does that mean? Where in the market does that fit? How might it affect our portfolios? But before we dive into that and spend some time looking at that, I do want to just step back and, based on some feedback and questions that I've had in conversations with some clients during the month of January, I think it's important to give a word of caution and say, hey, we need to be aware that we're coming off of two tremendous years of growth, right? And we set expectations for this year of a good year in the market, but a good year in the market has a different connotation than a great year or above average year in the market. And in 2023, the S&P 500 was up 26%. In 2024, approximately 23%. A good year in the market, or an average historically, would be around that 10, right? And so I think it's important to reset our measuring stick for this year. What we're talking about this year is we think we're going to have a good year. We really do. January, you might be looking at your statements when you're watching this, and January had a very tepid month in doing that. Some ups and downs in there, but overall, we've got 11 months to go, and we do think we'll end up with a good year, but a normal year, if I can call it that, in expectation. So with that as the backdrop, and that being said, Chuck, I want to kind of turn it over to you and give you an opportunity to dive into the first part of our theme today, or for this year, which is that word power.
Absolutely, Michael. Great assessment of this forthcoming year. And let's start off with the P. The P is the word productivity. And I'm going to read our note there. Gains will be immensely important for business and government moving forward. Probably the number one question, Michael, I've received out on the stump over the last 15 years, going way back to the great financial crisis, is what about the national debt? So we did a lot of research on this. As we get to the next slide, I'd like to highlight the McKinsey report, the famed McKinsey report, that basically tied together this concept of productivity in excess cumulative GDP. So let's kind of break down what they did. They basically laid before us the case for the automation revolution, driven by artificial intelligence, robotics, and other initiatives that are forthcoming, and I think undeniable, going out from 2025 and over the next several decades. That by the end of 2030, the United States can create $10 trillion in excess GDP. Now, why is this important, Michael? If you ask most people walking the street, they've heard of the $36 trillion number. That's our national debt. But what a lot of people don't know is the $29 trillion number. That's the annual output of all goods and services produced in the United States, AKA GDP. Now, for those of us that's taken an economics class, whenever the debt is higher than the GDP, which it is today, the alarm bell starts to slightly ring, Michael, and here we are today. So the question before us is, have we ever been as a country in a funk like this? And if we have, how did we get out of the mess, and how did productivity align with wage increase create excess economic growth? So as we get to the next slide here, you can see we have two green arrows, dark blue, light blue lines. Let's go back to 1948, Michael, coming out of World War II. 100 million deaths estimated between 1914 and 1944 caused by the casualty of those two global wars. Coming out of that, countries were looking over their shoulder. How am I going to survive? Who's going to invade me next? They set up shop on their own soil. And what ended up happening is that companies levered the technology to win the war. They implemented those into their products and services, and we created this productivity boom. So what's kind of defined productivity? It's output per worker hour. But think about this: if you owned a business, or you had a department that you ran in a company, or maybe even you were a teacher or a coach, you had athletes, you had students, you had workers who were relying on your leadership to provide the tools to you to actually excel at your job. When companies expand their technology and they put in the tools of their workers, those tools to actually create more output, we call that labor productivity. Well, we saw it expanded at 2.8% in that post-war boom from 1948 to 1971. So what did that mean, Michael? It meant that companies were more productive, they were more profitable, and they paid more tax to the government. But it didn't stop there. The light blue line indicates real wage compensation. They rewarded their workers after inflation with a higher wage, and they kept that wage higher even in the productivity. What did that mean? Workers made more money, they paid more taxes, it was sent to the federal government. At the peak of the first green arrow in the 1970s, we lost our way. Poor government policy, lack of initiative in the private sector. But if we look at that trough in the middle of the slide where the second green arrow begins, that's 1983. But what happened, Michael? We had a change in government policy, but we had inventions. The personal computer, the PC, the Macintosh. We then followed it up by the World Wide Web. We called it, back in the 80s and 90s, the internet now. And then we had cellular mobile phone technology. Labor productivity grew significantly. Companies became more profitable. They rewarded their workers with more money. They paid more tax. We saw a slide off beginning in 2000, lost our way all the way to about 2016, where you see the orange arrow on the base. From there, we've worked ourselves up with higher labor productivity, and we have higher wage compensation. Now we're back to the flat line. How do we move forward? We continue onward with these new technologies. And you know what happened in DC, Michael? It was a novel idea, but please go to the next slide. We balanced the budget. We balanced the budget last, those green mountains, back in 1968 and 69. Hey, look, it took 20 years of productivity and labor compensation gains. We last balanced the budget in 1980, 1998, 99, and 2000. It took 15 years, but we did it. Now, if anyone, Michael, would you maybe look at that August 83 number there? It says negative 5.39. We hit the bottom in 1983. That's the budget deficit to GDP. It's the way you measure the success or malaise of a given country is not by its debt. It's an omniscient amount yet, but it's how much they spend versus what they take in. Now, fast forward all the way to the right there, Michael, and you'll see a number, April of 24, 5.75. We're right where we were in August of 83. People ask me, can we do it? I simply say, I don't know, but the blueprint is here. So let's go to one last slide, Michael. I think food for thought. Michael, we went all the way back to 1789. I wasn't even around back then, but what happened? It was the ratification of the Constitution. We looked at every single year, calendar year, budget surplus or deficit. We ask ourselves what causes these deficits. Well, certainly wars. We see the War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I, World War II. Also, financial collapses, the Great Depression in the middle of the chart, and the global financial crises. Also, pandemics, COVID-19 on the far right. If you look at World War I in the middle, that elongated bar downwards is the Spanish flu of 1919 and 1920. But what about the blue arrow again, Michael? 1983. We really had no war to speak of. We backed out of the Vietnam War in 75. No financial collapse, no pandemic. But what caused it? government mismanagement, poor policy, the lack of private sector initiatives. We turned the corner, I think, in all of these. Can we balance the budget? Can we get things straight in DC? If we do, it's going to be caused by two things, Michael: productivity enhancements driven by technological innovation and higher wage compensation on a real basis to those individuals who are working in the United States today. So I'm going to pass it back to you, my friend, to close it off.
Thank you, Chuck, for that information. I appreciate that. That is wonderful uh, stuff. And certainly the productivity, GDP, is something we watch all the time. People have probably heard that referred to by advisors or financial people, and maybe not ever put it together with how it may impact the overall markets. But hopefully, those of you watching, you found that very helpful today and insightful. As always, if you have questions, feel free to contact us. We're happy to have those one-on-one conversations and talk about thoughts for this year. Next month, plan to connect with us again. Our team is planning to attend the Kingdom Advisors Conference coming up at the end of February here. And it is our goal to do our next recording from there, where we plan to sort of assess how things have gone since the inauguration of the new president, and we're be about a quarter of the way into his new term. And so our goal next month is to kind of do a little check and balance in our report to just see how things are trending and where things are going. Thank you again for being here. Hope you have a wonderful day.